A wise man once said, "Sometimes by losing a battle, you find a new way to win the war."
Hello and welcome to the show. Colourful conversations with Clergyman Pete and Businessman Mark. This week we debate World War III, 2018. Well, we've seen in the media recently global spats between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. Yes, the US President Donald Trump has boasted that his nuclear button is much bigger and indeed more powerful than the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Is that true? Well, Mr. Trump has been actively on Twitter stating that the latest contribution is an increasingly personalized feud between the nuclear-armed leaders. Who does have the bigger button? Who has the bigger weapon? Well, with me today is Clergyman Pete.
Yes.
Clergyman Pete, I know that you're sitting there with lots of buttons in front of you, tweaking away in our podcast. But tell me, who, in your opinion, has the biggest button? And are we actually now seeing the beginning of World War III?
Well, my buttons are small, but surprisingly well-formed. I think that we're going to discuss whether this is true, whether there is going to be World War III during this episode. But let me just start by saying that it is a difficult and scary time because we have this supreme leader who is slightly unstable, and Kim Jong-un as well. He's slightly unstable. But now, that quote that I started off the episode with, interestingly, was by Donald Trump. Sometimes by losing a battle, you find a new way to win the war. That's Donald Trump. So that's encouraging that he could show such wisdom. So I think it's not as simple a picture as saying that there are two madmen in charge of nuclear weapons. What we can say is that we're in a tricky situation in which the wrong move could result in such devastating force used, it could well trigger what is effectively World War III.
Yes.
And it could be this year. Could be this year.
It could be, and that's our prediction, folks. You heard it here. Well, look, I mean, this might seem like a little bit of a social media bravado, perhaps.
Might do.
Comments.
Could do.
But I don't think so.
No.
I think it is definitely a serious side. And I'd like to sort of point something out here because Kim Jong-un has, over the last 24 months, been experimenting with rockets. We've actually seen, in my opinion, some things go horribly wrong. And to your point that it perhaps could be that his rhetoric, where he has threatened that earlier in this year, that his nuclear launch button was always on my table, quote, this is what he has said. Now, this does raise some concerns because if we are dealing with a leader that perhaps is a little bit impulsive, irrational, that has implications for everyone else. Now, we know that some of the surrounding countries, including places like Japan, have expressed great concern over what this means, not just to the vicinity, but, of course, to global peace. And I was sort of wondering, well, what does it really mean when, say, for example, great leaders always sit there with this glowing, shiny button? What does it actually mean to us? And I thought, well, maybe here's a little thought in the form of a little poem called The Button Mushroom. Buttons, buttons, they are there to depress. The nuclear ones cause much distress. Use them as a powerful political threat and make your enemy truly sweat. Twist them, turn them, hear alarm bells linger, then feel the force of a fidgety finger. Watch them flash and draw attention, then button your lip and keep us in suspension. Push them, poke them, fasten them tight, prepare yourself for the mushroom military might. So are you bright as a button if the light turns red? The answer is no, because we'll all be dead.
Yes.
So there you go, you see. At the end of the day, we will all lose out. I mean, this idea of having a button on your table, okay, metaphorically, it doesn't quite work that way, of course. But we understand that we know the might of America and their military capability. But if Kim Jong-un were to be threatened in some way, surely Donald Trump wouldn't be using the nuclear button. Perhaps he'd be using other techniques.
Yes. Now, this is an interesting point because, of course, nuclear weapons aren't the only weapons available. There are extremely large conventional explosives which have been used recently, and it's certainly within Donald Trump's power as US president to use extremely powerful bombs that could take out, if he used a few of them, North Korea. I mean, that's the sort of power we're talking about, that we could take out the major cities there. They would have no power left if he were to use them. And so there is no way that North Korea could win a war with the United States. So it's really only if you think, right, Kim Jong-un is mad that he's going to do it. I don't think he is mad. That does leave you, however, mistakes, and I think there is easily the possibility that the technology in North Korea is maybe not up to scratch, and maybe something could go wrong, such that a bomb is detonated or accidentally or sent in the wrong direction and hits a US ally, and therefore sets off a chain of events for World War III. Because looking back over the last two world wars, as we now call them, the 1939-45 war was, of course, really went on a bit longer with the war with Japan, but it was known as the European War for a time, but became known as the World War. It did draw in other powers, and of course World War One was originally just called the Great War because they didn't know and rather hoped there wasn't going to be a second one. But I think that World War III, like those two, what we now call world wars, could be set off by something that doesn't seem worth it. Well, is anything worth it? But it may not be a big thing that sets it off. If you think about what the actual event that kicked off the events leading to the start of World War One, it was serious for those involved. It was an assassination, but it didn't seem as though simply the murder of Franz Ferdinand, even though it was him and his wife who was pregnant. So yes, it was a terrible act, but it wasn't something you'd expect to set off a war. It was because everything was on tenterhooks, and then this kicked it off. It was the trigger was already set, and this is what actually finally pulled the trigger. Wow. And World War II also, you were in a certain position where it could have gone either way. With World War II, it may not have been a war. There may have been an agreement in which land was parcelled up, with Germany getting more of it than they deserved, maybe. But Hitler made some strategic errors there and ended up losing. So, what could trigger it now? Well, it could be, as we've described. That could be what triggers it.
Well, I actually think to take this point that maybe our focus shouldn't be on North Korea, because he's already reached out an olive branch to South Korea, as we've seen very recently, and this is encouraging. Perhaps he is willing to have more amicable discussions with his neighbours and perhaps others as well. But maybe it could be somewhere else. Maybe we should be looking at the Middle East, possibly with some of the threats that we've seen from Iran, and maybe elsewhere. That actually that could be one of the trigger points.
No, I agree. It seems to me that we seem to be continually having say this. Long may it continue. But Donald Trump appears to be a better president than we imagined. Although we on Mark and Pete predicted he would be president, that wasn't that we thought he'd be a good president. We thought that he would be better than the alternative from the Democrats. But it does seem that, much to my surprise anyway, the foreign policy actual outcomes have been a lot better than I thought from Trump, and his handling of the North Korea potential crisis does seem to have borne fruit. His handling of of Iran as good as can be expected, with there already being some agreement in place. His working with other Muslim countries and then support for Israel. It does seem to be that he's got a good grasp of it. But even with that being the case, there can still be a trigger, because there's been, yes, President Trump seems to be doing well. President Obama really stirred things up with his inaction and letting the letting very unstable and ideologically driven governments get too much power. Thinking especially of Iran there, but his leaving of the world stage in such a tinderbox position means that anything could kick off. Now, I think, though, it's a different policy, which isn't really Obama's fault. You know, he didn't do everything wrong. You can't always blame him. I'm thinking of European policies on immigration. Could be the policy that kicks off World War III. In fact, when we were saying we're going to predict that World War III, it may not be any of the things we mentioned. Those are possibilities. But what could happen is the rise of what's often called the far right in Germany. Now, I know before people write in, actually Nazis are on the left, they're the National Socialist Party, but they're the far something anyway, extremists. Extremist party in Germany could well take over, with Merkel losing popularity in Germany and may not be Chancellor for much longer.
Well, as we speak on this particular podcast, he's struggling to form an alliance.
Yes.
So this is a bit of a concern. Yes,
it is a bit of a concern. Now, we could go further and say it is known that that there's the German sort of anti-immigration movement because of the excessive immigration coming in, and I agree with their points. Or if the point that they're making is that immigration needs to be controlled, but I think that it's been such large numbers that you could get a party which runs and takes leadership on the understanding that it's going to throw out all immigrants, that it's going to blame them for problems, and that Germany will go back to being expansionist and work towards forming of an ethno-state in Germany. Could be the problem. And if that happens, of course, before I know that you're probably well versed in this, Mark, but our listeners might not be. But in fact, it's little known fact that, of course, Hitler does have relatives who live across Middle America. There's some on Long Island, apparently. I'm reported by sources. Perhaps it could be son of Hitler.
Well, exactly.
Comes and takes over.
I do believe that this actually was genuinely the case, that Hitler did actually have a son. Is that correct? But this was the First World War. He
did have allegedly a son. Yes. I mean, there was someone who was claimed to have been his son. He died in the 1980s. Was born to a Hitlerian dalliance with a teenage girl during World War I. But there may well be another relative that comes forward. Now, I'm not saying that they need to be genuine. I mean, it seems a bit flippant saying it, but I think it isn't flippant in that. Just imagine this situation, gentle listeners. If someone claiming heritage or to be in Hitler's family takes leadership of a party, what could happen in Germany if the mood is to be expansionist and to form an ethno-state? What could happen? So I'm not saying that will happen. I'm just saying this is one of a series of ones which we've been identified. There's lots of different areas of concern, only one of which is needed to pull the trigger.
I think that one point that we should mention when we talk about a third world war, it doesn't necessarily mean pushing buttons and they have to be nuclear.
No.
You mentioned about the humanitarian war. This is basically perhaps a persecution, perhaps a country, whichever country that may be, and we've already highlighted a few, where perhaps the tensions with immigration gets too far. Now, we've seen this problem particularly in Europe. We're also seeing it in other places like Yemen. Now, that's a very serious situation. The plight of the people in Yemen is getting worse and worse, and humanitarian bodies are crying out for further support to help them. So what we are seeing is this undercurrent. And to the point that we're saying, really, I guess, is that it isn't necessarily a case of that a global leader will push a button necessarily on a table. But what could happen in 2018, certainly by the end of the year, is that there could be either further tensions which are exacerbated in mainland Europe. And I think that's possibly one of the things that we're indicating here. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. And people could say, one accusation of us, as which you alluded to at the side, is, are you just doing this for clickbait? Are you stirring up this fear of a world war in order just to get clicks? And actually, it's rather the opposite. By drawing attention to the possibilities, the more people that draw attention to the risks out there, the more likely we are to have negotiation, to have someone being, as a wise man once said, prepared to lose a battle in order to win the war. Let's have peaceful resolutions. Let's not think that World War III couldn't happen. It could well happen. In fact, we're predicting it, unless wisdom prevails. Let's point out time and time again that the risk is there. Let's keep it in our minds when we vote for people, decide who to vote for, when we write to MPs, MEPs, presidents, prime ministers, queens, whoever you write to us have influence. Let's make sure that World War III doesn't happen. Let's make it that this year, the first year ever, that Mark and Pete are wrong with a prediction.
Oh, indeed. Well, there you go. Push your buttons now and let us know what you think, listeners. Why not log on to markandpete.com and let us know your thoughts? This is a subject which we know is definitely going to raise its head once more again in 2018. So we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for listening today. We hope that we'll all be around very soon. And Clergyman Peter, you're playing around with some buttons there. No, don't push that one.
Whoops.
3, 2, 1.